Hi everybody, Heather O'Neill here. Let me introduce myself first. If you don't know me, I am a game designer and currently a freelance consultant in gaming, trying to focus more on the business side of games, but I do some marketing and things like that. I'm also the CEO of Ninth Level Games, which makes board games and role-playing games. Member of Game Makers Guild of Philadelphia, and newly on the board of Unpub as well. And through 2020, I've actually done a number of speed pitching events online just because the nature of things. So I put together the talk that I'm going to do today for Metatopia back in early November, and it went over really well. So Pam had asked me to bring that on to the group. So basically what we're going to talk about is building relationships with publishers, but it's not just that easy of a step. There's a couple of steps to it that I want to talk about. So we're going to talk about just general networking in the tabletop industry, getting a pitch meeting, following up after that pitch meeting, and then some resources that we'll go over. And if at any point you have any comments or questions, you can just post them below. I'll try to get those at the end. I'm going to periodically check them, but if I miss them, I'll definitely get them at the end. So general networking in tabletop. Obviously, it's a little harder now because we don't have conventions. You're not just running into somebody and getting the opportunity to meet them. It's a little bit tougher now, but a couple of tips. You might already know these, but it's just always a good reminder, is to look out for opportunities as they arise. If for some reason you are in, Board Game Broads and you're having a chat and somebody who's a publisher is also chatting, it's not a bad idea to kind of have a discussion with them about whatever that topic is, because now, I've seen that name. They know that you're a member of Board Game Broads. And, next thing you know, when we can go back to seeing each other and you see them at a convention, they'll remember the name from the group, for example. Another way to network is just finding out more about what and who are in the tabletop industry. So looking up game companies. When you see a game, find out, what's this company? Not everything is as big as Hasbro or, Asmodee. So there's definitely approachable publishers that are at a level that you would be able to actually reach out to and talk to. Another thing is just to market yourself as well as your game. A lot of this industry is who you know and who knows you. So being a name that somebody's heard of before is definitely not a bad thing. It's something that will help you possibly get your foot in the door on certain things because it's somebody that they've heard of or heard their friend talk about or seen post or engaged with on Twitter, anything like that. So I highly encourage you to work on that. And then, of course, just engaging in the community, joining playtesting groups, joining groups like Board Game Broads, things, commenting on paddles and Twitch streams and anything like that. So just engaging in general. And basically, I guess what I want to do is kind of delve into each of those areas a little bit deeper. So when I say look for opportunities, and I gave an example, this is not an open invitation to just start Facebook messaging every person in Board Game Broads and saying, publish my game. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about, getting the courage still to say something, to get involved, but without overstepping. You don't want to constantly be talking about how I have this game in development, I have this game I want to get signed. People will start tuning that out. But if you have your eyes and ears open, you're engaging, and you hear, hey, there's a speed pitching event, or hey, there's a contest. Next thing you know, you're getting more aware of these opportunities, and there's more options for you to get your game signed. So that's mostly what I mean there. For example, as a design group, playtesting group, maybe there's some people in that group that have gotten games signed before. So without having to actually meet the publisher, you could say, for example, it was me, hey, Heather, could you talk to me about how that process went? Or do you have any contacts at that company that I could reach out to if you know that they're looking for something? It's a little bit of an easier way to talk to somebody in your group than it is to maybe reach out directly to a publisher contact. So I think those are the type of things that you just want to keep an eye on. Feel comfortable to ask people that you have mutual friends with, people that are in your groups, and basically talk about the fact that you're a game designer too. If you're on lurking and you never post and you never say you're working on designs, people might not know that. So possibly keeping a design blog, that might not be something you want to do, but great if you can do it. Possibly just posting every once in a while about it on Instagram, or every once in a while on Twitter, that kind of thing. So it's something I wouldn't say is required, but by talking more about your own games and your own process, it's just one more way that you're out there. And that leads me to, now that you've made the game, let's say you're close to being finished it, and you're thinking about actually pitching it out there, the number one thing you want to do is start researching places that you think would actually fit your game. So if you're making a game like Gloomhaven, then you don't want to be talking to Game Right. Like, that's just not the right fit. You want to be talking to the Epic game publishers. If you're making a little tiny dice game that's a $14 price point, then you don't want to be talking to the heavy Euro game publishers. So taking that step to research companies that you think would fit your game, I think is definitely a good step. Have in mind a couple ideas of the type of publisher that you would want to go with. Doesn't always mean that they're going to work out, or that that's who's going to sign your game, because you could always get thrown for a loop where a bigger company says, hey, we're starting to make smaller games now. But it definitely helps to give you a start. The other thing is, if you don't even know what to start there, of course, Board Game Geek is a good resource. Their website's a good resource, and following them on social media is a good idea. It might also help you realize, oh, I don't like what they post, or I don't really like a lot of the games they make after all. I just like that one. So it's the kind of thing, it will help you see what's going on. So I would suggest doing that. And then if there are any, I would go through their back catalog and look through the designers. And if there's anybody that if it's like, oh, I know John Gilmore, I could reach out to John, for example. That's another way that you can baby step to getting to the next level of the publisher. Again, all of this is without overstepping. It's a tactful way of engaging with the community. It's a tactful way of having that conversation is definitely the most important. I've definitely been at conventions where someone has come up to me right away and said look at my game, I'm making a game, maybe you'll want to publish it. And it's that's turning me off already, because it's just a little too aggressive, and it's a little bit too desperate. So you don't want to give off that vibe. No matter how good the game is. Going back to a couple more things about marketing yourself. I see Shannon mentioned this as well, about engaging the community. It's actually a pretty small community when it's all said and done. The board game industry is pretty small. Probably someone knows somebody at a publisher, or knows this designer that you really admire, for example. So there's going to be ways to get introduced to these publishers. That's not forced. It's not going to be that hard. Right now it's a little tougher because we're not physically going anywhere, but there are a lot of connections that you can make, even online, just on Twitter and Facebook. And like we talked about, if you market yourself in even a small way, even if you just say, hey, I'm just putting up some prototype images, or hey, this weekend we play tested my game and it was really fun, and you have a couple images or a comment about it. Next thing you know, people will say, oh yeah, you have that game about the aliens, right? Oh, that looked cool. So, you won't really think about it you don't really think about it sometimes that, you know, people are remembering and they are paying attention. So again, you know, it's not required if you're super, super shy, but it's definitely could help. Being, you know, going to things like speed pitching events, Kathleen, because Kathleen just commented that they got their game signed by going to the speed pitching event that I hosted at Metatopia, which is awesome. You know, these contests that they put out, going on a podcast or a panel at a online con. Don't feel that you have to be like the biggest, you know, authority on something. If you're the authority on one thing, you might be able to have an experience that's different that you could talk about. So these are other ways you could market yourself. And the biggest thing that I want to say is you don't have to be, in quotes, someone or a name to get your pitch heard. It really, you know, maybe it used to be that way, but it's not that way anymore. Don't feel like, oh, well, I just worked on this for 6 months and I'm not really worthy yet. That's not true. You know, you can put yourself out there and get signed just as well as somebody who's been getting their game signed for 10 years. So potentially even more so because it's a fresh look. So just want to encourage people to do that. What are some other comments I had here? Just some other general engagement with the community comments. You know, they're going to give you a lot of your resources. If you don't already see that from this group, I'm sure you will as time goes on. So much of this is, hey, newbie here, can you help me about X, Y, or Z? And someone will pop in, right? Or, hey, I, you know, got the opportunity to, you know, do this design contest. Can somebody look over my rules? You know, that's the kind of thing where it's really cool, actually, that a lot of the tabletop industry is really helpful and actually encouraging new designers for the most part. So by posting those type of things, you're almost always going to get some sort of feedback from the group. And I encourage you to do that for sure. Again, like we said, conventions are not around in person, but even online, you know, going to some of these online conventions and playing a prototype game with somebody, you know, they're going to make some connections that by the end of COVID, when you see them at a convention, it's like, oh, I played your game, you know, 6 months ago. That's really cool. And then you find out that person, you know, works for Pandasaurus or something, you know. I mean, it's the kind of thing, that's just how the industry is. So it can never hurt to put yourself out there and go to these online conventions or to the actual conventions when they come back too. You know, and then, like I said, you know, show off your designs. You might decide you're going to self-publish the first print run, you know, 100, 500, 1,000 pieces. That's totally fine. It doesn't mean you're not going to pitch the game later. You know, maybe you want to get it out there for whatever reason. You're just going to sell it or do a small Kickstarter. That actually could potentially still be grounds to get it signed. So I'm not saying you have to do that, but that is something that if you're really, really dead set on getting the game made your way just to get it out into the world, you could totally do that and then pitch the game for maybe a second print run or more of your vision of what you want it to be. Just something to think about there. You know, again, as a lot of people have probably told you, if you are new to the industry, that, you know, a lot of this is taking that step to put yourself out there. So I just encourage everybody to do that. It was even hard for me to do that even after I have been in the industry. I was just kind of over here, not actually a designer. And then finally taking that step to designer, you know, was really where I was like, okay, it's a little bit nervous, but I guess I'll do it. And, you know, finally making that step, it's like, oh, this is awesome. There's so many resources and people helping, and it's great. So it's just the first step's a little scary. That's all. So yeah, after you've gotten that, I mean, you know, who knows the time frame of how long that would take to get the right connections. But, you know, let's say that you're trying to get a pitch meeting that is not through a speed pitching event or an open call. Because if it's an open call or a speed pitching event, you're going to have a better chance of actually getting to meet with them because it's them specifically asking for designs. if you're going to email them or contact them directly because you really feel your game fits that company, for example, that's a harder one to get the pitch meeting for. It doesn't mean it won't happen, but you have to be more prepared for that in order to actually have that come to fruition. So, what you're going to want to do is, like I said, after you've researched the companies, now what you want to do is find out if they're looking for pitches. Are they even taking pitches? It might say right away on their website that we are currently not taking pitches. That doesn't mean you can't email them with a really cool idea, but don't be discouraged if you never hear anything back, or if you just get a form response just saying, we're not accepting pitches right now. If there is an open call, or if it doesn't say anything specific, go for it. I don't think it could hurt. And obviously the next thing you want to do is see if you can get a direct contact. If you can get a direct contact that's not the general like info at blah blah website, that's going to be so much better. It's a lot like a job interview where if you know somebody at the company, they fast track your resume to the top, right? It's the same idea. So if there's any way you happen to have a direct contact, that will just cut out so much, because it'll get you at least in front of the people making the decision. Doesn't mean you're going to get the meeting, but it will probably get actually looked at, right? What you need to also think about is how you're going to word your request and how you're going to cut through the noise of all the other materials and emails that they're getting for these game pitches. And, you want to be ready to think about what would you show in that email, what kind of tidbits are you going to give them, and what are you going to hold back for the pitch, if anything. But these are just things you want to think about. Let's go into these each a little bit deeper. So as you go to the website, you try to find something out, right? Let's just say you can't find anything out. That's fine. What you want to do is you want to use the network that you have created, and you want to ask around. So maybe in your playtesting group, or in Board Game Broads, or in your local game group or something like that. You want to say, hey, does anybody know anybody who works at this company? And it might be no, but at least there's a chance you could do something there. If that's a no and you don't really have anything there, if you follow them on Twitter, you could, if they accept direct messages, you could direct message them. If they don't, you could just flat out call them out and be like, hey, Pandasaurus, I'm going to keep picking up Pandasaurus today. Hey, Pandasaurus, are you currently accepting pitches? And they're probably going to answer on there. So, once you finally figure that out, which sometimes can be a lot of the time frame, unfortunately, just the research alone can take a while. But once you finally get to that point, now you got to think about, what are you going to do? How are you going to submit this? So if they say, yes, we are accepting pitches, but they don't give you an email, it just says, apply on our website. It might be a general form. It might be a generic, email address. So that might be going to a mailbox of a marketing person. It might be going to a mailbox of an administrative person. It's potentially not going to the person that would actually be seeing the pitches. So you really got to think about how you're titling the email so that they realize that it is a new game pitch. You don't want to give them too much. You don't want it to look like spam. So you got to think about what you attach as well, because you don't want to necessarily have it hit a spam or a junk mail type of thing. So you want to make sure that you set it apart, let them know it's a game pitch in the title so that somebody can route that correctly. And then just some of the things you want to say in that email or form are, what makes your game really fun, what sets your game apart from other games maybe that are similar or just in general. What are the key points as to why you'd want to own this game, or people always say they want to own the game, for example, the feedback you've been getting. And then you want to think about like showing possibly a picture or a mock-up of a sell sheet that can explain all this so that they have a visual as well. At Metatopia, actually, and Pam can can attest to this. We had a long discussion about sell sheets and how important or not important they were with a pitch, and almost every publisher said they were very important. So they definitely encourage you to have that available. I think what ends up happening is they see so many of these that they don't want to guess. They just want to look at the little bullet points, the picture, and go, okay, this is what you're pushing to me. This is the number of players. This is the time. This is the vibe of the game. Awesome. So definitely that is something that you want to have at least ready, if not already attached to that. But I would suggest attaching it if possible. What you want to do when you're actually wording the request is you want to have a great one-liner that sums up the game. This would be something you'd actually want to have for your live pitch too. So you don't want to just put a paragraph or 2 paragraphs like, it takes place on the alien planet of blah, 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 in the world of blah, 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 and like this whole epic thing, because they're going to zone out immediately. Like, you don't want to start with that at all. You want to put like a one-liner about what's going on and why it's awesome. However, you want to avoid superlative claims. You don't want to say, this is the best game ever. You're going to sell so many of them. It's better than Settlers of Catan. You know, like, you don't want to do anything like that. Like, that will immediately get it deleted. The other thing you don't want to do is disparage other games or other companies. You don't want to say, well, my game is better than Splendor, or my game's like Ticket to Ride, but even better, because potentially that's going to turn them off from the tone that you're taking, or it's actually a superlative claim saying how great your game is. So I would, hopefully you wouldn't do that, but I just thought it was good to point that out. And then, you know, you want to make sure that you give them a pretty good vibe of the game and enough for them to understand how a turn would work without overwhelming them. So like I said about the one-liner summary, you don't want to tell them all about your epic world. You want to have a one-liner that explains the vibe of that. And basically, if you're doing something where you can attach a document, I would suggest attaching just the sell sheet. If you have short rules, maybe you think that they're solid, you might want to do that too. But also, if a 30-page rulebook comes in or it's over 10 megabytes, they're not probably interested in it. So that sell sheet is what I would do at a minimum. Then, you know, what you want to think about is, you know, what do you want to show them right then, and what do you want to hold back, if anything, right? So like I said, you want to 100% include the great one-liner, the summary of the game, an example of one turn or turns if it's cooperative or something, and a sell sheet and your contact information. That is all that you need to have. If you happen to have a link to like an actual play or a video, I think that's fine. But I don't think you need anything further. Again, like we said, let's say it's a speed pitching event or a open call or a design contest where you're going to actually be able to video yourself doing a pitch. You know, when you're doing that, follow-up's going to be really important because you've gotten the meeting. They're seeing it. But now you have to wait and see what's happening. A lot of times in a meeting, face-to-face meeting, they will show signs that they're interested. They might say that they're interested, but until that contract comes in or that email follow-up actually happens, it's not signed. And sometimes that can take 2 weeks, and sometimes it can take 2 months, and sometimes it never happens. So it's just something that is very important, is then following up afterwards. So just like I talked about to get your pitch heard with possibly having a direct contact, just like a job interview, you want to follow up pretty shortly after. So I would say, depending on what day of the week it was, I would follow up within a week, around a week of the pitch. So, you know, you've done your follow-up. In that follow-up email, you're going to say, hey, so-and-so publisher, thank you so much for hearing my pitch last weekend. you had, maybe they said something good. You say you had expressed interest in, maybe, talking further about this. Would you want to set up another meeting? Do you need to see more info, et cetera, et cetera. If they did not specifically express any interest, you might just say, hey, thanks for seeing my pitch. I wanted to just leave you another summary. Here's my sell sheet again. Here's the rule book. Here's a link to the actual play, whatever you have. Leave it at that and see what they say. So then I would give that about another week. If they don't respond to that email in a week, I would still follow up one more time. I would do 3 total follow-ups. And if you get no response in 3 follow-ups, it's potentially possible that they're not interested. So like I said, I would take a week, do the first one. Another week, do a second one. And if they don't answer that one within another week, I might wait 2 or 3 more weeks and then follow up. If they do respond and they say, oh yeah, we'd like to hear more. We're just really busy right now. I'll get back to you in the next few weeks or something like that. Hopefully they say something like that. But if whatever they end up saying, you want to make sure that you respect the timeline. So if they say we're totally swamped, we're fulfilling a Kickstarter or something, we're really not going to be ready to talk about this till the new year. Don't follow up before the new year, because that's just going to annoy them and put pressure on them, especially if they're interested in it, right? If they're interested in it, it's just going to put pressure on them, and it might be just enough pressure to have them not kind of slink away. So you just want to respect their timeline. If they don't really tell you a timeline, then I would reply and say, that sounds great. Why don't I follow up in 2 weeks and see where you guys stand? Something like that. Make it a solid time frame. And again, probably know this, but just always try to remind people that, don't get discouraged. These people are not only just seeing pitches, they're also probably doing a whole nother job. So this is something else they have to do on top of their job. And they have to see 10s, 20s, hundreds of different pitches. So, just be polite, pleasant, respectful. Don't act like it's demanding and say, hey, we've talked, you said you were going to sign this and it's already been a month. It's like, nope, they're busy. Understand that. Don't be surprised if it takes a while for them to get back. Don't be surprised if they say they need to run it through some more chains. Maybe the person who's seeing it isn't the person who has the authority to actually sign the game. That's possible sometimes. So, things sometimes can take a little bit longer than you would like. All right, so let's say you followed up. Maybe they came back and said they need another month or 2 before they're ready to make any kind of decision. Like I said before, I was just going through this again. Even if your game is great and totally innovative, it doesn't mean it might not fit their line, and it might not fit their timeline. So most publishers now they're definitely working on 22. They might even be working on 23 releases. So if they're thinking, okay, you're a 2023 release, what other games do we have? What's our time frame? What's our budget on those games? Does this work? So it could be that for whatever reason in 2022 they're lock solid, and 2023 they have 2 really expensive bigger games, and your game's a kind of bigger expensive game. Doesn't mean they wouldn't sign it for 2024, but most people aren't signing quite that far out yet. It's possible you'll start seeing that next year. But let's say it was a smaller, cheaper game, that might work fine if they have 2 other larger scale games coming out that year. A lot of times you'll hear, if you listen around in the industry, you'll hear people say oh, we have a hole in our line, right? And what that means is they've got the big epic game, the medium weight game, the cheaper strategy game, and the really light game. And maybe one of those is missing for a year, depending on the type of games that they make. So you'll hear people say this, and that's when they're really specifically looking for a type of game. And they might not tell anybody what that is. They might not actually know what it is. They might just know it needs to be a $40 price point, etc., etc., you know, fit in this box, that kind of thing. So a lot of times what's happening is when you have a good pitch, they're thinking to themselves, how can I make this fit into that box and price point that I need everything to fit into? It also could be that the person who saw the pitch loves it, thinks it would be great for the line, but then they take it up the chain, and that management person is trying to figure out, how do we fit it in the price point? How do we fit it in the box? How do we, you know, what art do we do? Can we retheme it, et cetera, et cetera? So, you know, just all these factors go into things. It's not just the quality of the game or the mechanics of the game. So you just got to think about this when timelines take a while, or every time they say they're going to follow up, they need more time again. It's quite possible. It's always a good sign, though, if they're even responding to you. So don't be discouraged by that. You know. Let's see here. Other notes that I had. This is a very important point. If you're ever lucky enough to get a pitch, either on video or in person with a publisher, treat that as a learning experience to hone your pitch. Actually saying the pitch out loud is kind of scary, and if you don't practice it a couple of times, it can get a little bit awkward and fumbly, and maybe doesn't flow as well. So what you want to think about doing is prepping for that actual pitch. I didn't really go into that much in this because this was more about the relationships, but just wanted to mention this, that, you know, it seems like, oh, I have it all written down here, it's no problem. But when you actually go and try to say it under that pressure, it can get awkward, and it can get a little bit nerve-wracking. And you don't want to be looking down at a paper the whole time. You want to be engaged and having fun. So I would encourage you to practice this with friends over video. What we did at some of our other speed pitching events was had some of the designers get together with other ones, and they practice with each other. I know if you follow Weird Giraffe and Carla Kops, I think every Sunday she does a kind of like a designer meetup and a designer talk, but sometimes they will do practice pitches, and actually with feedback. So something like that would be invaluable to go do, because you might think it's great, your spouse might think it's great, your mom might think it's great, but then when you put it out to strangers, everybody says, what are you even talking about? I don't get this at all. So it's scary to do it, but once you've done it a couple of times, you get better about that. Let's see. Pam had asked if there was any other tips about pitching online versus in person. Yes. If you have the type of game that doesn't work well in Tabletop Simulator or in Tabletopia, which are kind of the standard for online pitching these days, if for some reason your game just doesn't work that way, it's more dexterous or has big components that you want to show off, you want to make sure that the video screen that you're sharing, everybody can see what you're doing. And you might want to have maybe a PowerPoint or something that has some graphics as well that you could move over to, that could maybe zoom in on a card, or show an example of an interaction if for some reason the physical piece wouldn't make any sense there. So that's something I have seen a lot of people have trouble with if they have something that's in person over video. Depending on what's going on, if the video feed isn't great, you know, it's a real shame, because they can't quite see the card, or they can't quite see the art. So by having like a backup PowerPoint, I think that would also be helpful. If you are on Tabletop Simulator or Tabletopia, which I don't know how that one works as much as Tabletop Simulator, but in Simulator, taking a couple screenshots of different points of the game is a really good idea. Like, this is set up. Here's how a turn works. This is the end game situation. So you can progress through by having those. First of all, you're not moving fiddling pieces and then they're falling over and you say, oh, I got the wrong card or something like that. If you could just have it pre-ready so that it's nice and clean on the screen, that will be very helpful as well. And then they might still want you to zoom in on something, but at least you have it set up ready to go the way you want to show them. It also helps doing that because you could have the wording together that you're going to say to go with those 3 or 4 screenshots, and that will help flow in your pitch. What else was I going to say? I think the other thing is, let's say you're having a lot of responses from people that are possibly good, possibly bad. You don't know what to think. Sometimes they might say, this game's so cool. I love your art. This is really interesting. And those are all fine and well, but just because they said what I just said does not mean that they're signing your game. They might think it's great. They're trying to be polite though. So if they actually aren't planning to sign the game, they're not going to say, oh, this game sucks and I don't want anything to do with it, right? I mean, hopefully they don't say that. Some people are really good and upfront to say, sorry, this isn't going to fit our line, but it's really cool though. So then you know right off the bat, okay, this isn't going to happen, but at least I know that they think it's a cool design and I should be encouraged to continue to, show this off. On the other hand, if you think you have a negative pitch because they're drilling you about how mechanics work or they're questioning a lot of things, that doesn't necessarily mean that they're not interested. They might be just having the wheels turn in their head where they're thinking, wait, this is pretty cool, but how does this work? Is this actually as cool as I think it is? Is this interesting? So, there's going to be reasons why you're perceiving it as good or bad, but actually that's not what it is. So you got to go in, probably have to do a few of them to really start feeling everything. But, yeah, Pam just said, if they say good luck, that means no. Okay, that's pretty clear. Yeah. If they say, well, good luck with the game, yeah, that usually means it. But yeah, I mean, use it as an experience because, like I said, it is scary to pitch. And also use that negative and or positive comments. If you keep hearing, if you only hear the art is great, the theme is great, and you hear nothing about the mechanics and the interactions, maybe you want to think about that. If you get a lot of questions about the way things interact, but no one's really caring about the theme or the art, well then the one good thing about that is it will allow you to change that or work with the publisher and have that be an option to change. Some games, the theme's really integral. Other games, it's really the mechanics. So you could do that. And depending on what publisher you go with, they might really care about changing the theme to something that fits in their line. Let's see here. I've got a couple of more things to go over here. If you have any questions, feel free to pop them in. The last things I want to go over are other resources that you might not know about. These are places that you can engage with the community and possibly learn more about what publishers are doing, what contests are going on, what game jams are going on, what news there is. Like I said, game design groups. So some of these playtest groups or design groups, Game Makers Guild is in Boston and Philadelphia. There's the New York playtesting group. There's a Chicago playtesting group. There is Game Designers in North Carolina. There's probably many more I don't know about, but there's a whole bunch of these groups out there depending on where you are. And usually they were local because people were physically meeting at a game store. Well, now it doesn't matter if you're local to them because everything's on Discord and Tabletop Simulator. So you can join these groups, and they usually meet once a week. Sometimes they even meet more than that. So you can get your game played, you can play other games, and you can bounce a lot of questions off of these people because everybody's in the same boat. Everybody is designing a game that they're either going to self-publish or get signed. So it's a great resource. Of course, there's many organizations that help to get your game signed. So there are places like Unpub, the Unpublished Game Network, that I'm going to self-plug there. And that is a resource for designers it's free to sign up. You can list all of your games. You can sign up for in-person and online events for free. And you can hear about different things that are going on in the tabletop industry. Metatopia is an online convention that's also an unpublished games convention that just passed. Actually, it was in early November. That is a great resource to go to as well. A lot of panels, a lot of things, and you could actually look them up on Twitch. All of the panels are up from that event. Protospiel is another one. Protospiel Online's been going on all through COVID, and that's another great thing to check out. And then a new one that you may or may not have heard about is the Pitch Project, where you submit your game, and I believe you get to pitch to about 50 publishers. So these are all things you want to look into, look at when their next event is, and maybe make a goal to try to attend one of these events. Like I said before, the community itself is very, very important to join, which would be your Twitter, Facebook, now TikTok, and Instagram. You can start following people. You can start engaging in groups. It's very important to do this. And then you want to, you want to leverage in the right way your personal relationships and your mutual friends to find out, where should you even start and what group should you be in? Who should you be talking to? And then one weekend, going back to in-person conventions, and of course for now, online conventions. You can still make a pretty good connection to the online conventions. However, what we've found, everyone's probably experienced this if you've attended one, is because you're at your own home, you're not looking for something to do for 4 hours while you're walking around the hall. There was a lot of times where, well, we're stuck in this place, so sure, I'll play this game, or sure, I'll sit here and have a soda with you and talk about, my favorite 10 games or something like that. Kind of a lot of that is gone. People go to their event, they watch the panel, and then they leave. So unfortunately, there's not quite as much engagement as we would like. But when Unpub did their event in August and Metatopia did theirs in November, we made it a point to try to have networking events and have things where you would be on Discord so that you would be actually talking to other people. But it is a lot harder. But still, I encourage you to look into these things and go to those. Trying to wrap this up. Let's see here. Yeah, I guess that pretty much sums it up. Like I said, my overall, my takeaways, I guess you would say, would be to look for opportunities, engage with the tabletop community, be thorough and concise in your, thorough yet concise, I guess, in your pitch requests and on your sell sheet, and get feedback from other people before you submit anything to a publisher, just by showing it to somebody else, they might pick up on one thing or might not understand one thing that to you is very clear. So those would be my takeaways. Good luck with everything. I encourage many of you to submit pitches to publishers and do game contests and game events. Good luck out there. All right. Bye. Thank you.